All right, this is the second in the narrated series for PowerPoints. This PowerPoint correlates to Chapter 3 in your text on clear targets. If you have not noticed, or hopefully you will notice in the future now that I'm bringing it to your attention, for each of the sessions that I have created, I have listed targets for what the goal of that session is, what I hope you gain from the session, and what learning I hope takes place. So the learning targets for Chapter 3 are explain the connection between clear targets and assessment quality, classify learning targets by type, determine whether your learning targets are clear to you and to your students, clarify and deconstruct learning targets as needed, and create student-friendly versions of learning targets as needed. This slide will come back again at the very end of the PowerPoint presentation, and we will classify each of these targets once we have gone through and learned each of the 5 types of targets. So, as I was stating in the very first PowerPoint, North Carolina is a standards-based system. North Carolina has adopted the Common Core state standards. What that means is it is a national set of standards that, as of this point, upwards of 45 states have adopted the Common Core. So that means if I travel to a state like Tennessee or Arizona or California, that in a grade level, say grade 4, the same standards are being taught to that level of student, so that we are going a little bit deeper into our curriculum and focusing on certain things throughout that grade level band. So when we think about standards-based curriculum, the students, what the student needs to learn drives all the decisions that we are making in the classroom. So it drives the planning, the instruction, and the assessment. But there's one other thing that we need to think about when we are thinking about what we are doing in the classroom, and when you enter the classroom as a teacher for the first time, it's not just what the Common Core piece of the standards that have been implemented, but also what other factors the school district or the state or the county may have also included on top of. So the Common Core is not inclusive of everything that needs to be taught, but it is the main focus for curriculum in the state of North Carolina. So when we think about curriculum, I think oftentimes people equate curriculum to textbooks, and I think we need to be careful about how we define curriculum because it is not a textbook. Textbooks are there as a resource to help support curriculum, but they by no means are the epitome of what curriculum should look like. Oftentimes textbook publishers are publishing for multiple states, multiple school districts, so it's not that you're getting something personalized just for you and for your goals, but it is a very lucrative business, so they are trying to give you curriculum that looks nice, that is user friendly, and all those pieces, but you as an instructional teacher need to think about what is best for kids and how are you going to get there. So when I think about curriculum, the example given here is I think about a GPS system, that you know where you're starting and you know where you're ending, and you have all these different routes to get you to that same ending point. So curriculum isn't the end all be all. There's not one way to meet the goals, but there's multiple ways. So if you see that your kids need something, maybe you take a turn in one direction or another, whatever the needs of the student are, but the goal remains the same, that you are trying to get to this end, this learning target that has been established through the Common Core. So the statement of intent and learning. Unfortunately, in education, people like to coin their own phrases oftentimes. So when we look at curriculum, there's all these different terms. So Common Core standards, which I've talked about, but they are also content standards. There's also benchmarks. So you have this list of terms in front of you, but oftentimes they are referring to the same outcome. So, whatever you choose to use, whatever the state may choose to use or your district chooses to use, they really mean the same thing oftentimes. So for this class, for the rest of this session, we are going to be using the term learning targets. The state of North Carolina has in their written documents, what has been published on their website, they are showing the trend that this is the direction in which they will be going in talking about standards. So the learning targets, it is also what the authors use in our text. So the types of learning targets that we have are knowledge, reasoning, skill, product, and disposition. I really want you to focus on the first four. The fifth one, the disposition, is really an affective target. So it's about how you feel, how you view learning, how you view education, how you view people. So it's not such a graded type of assessment. So we are going to go through knowledge, reasoning, skill, product. Please think of them as hierarchical, that you start with knowledge. You can't go to reasoning unless you've had knowledge, and so on and so forth. So knowledge targets include factual information, procedural knowledge, and conceptual understanding. So when I think about procedural knowledge, just to make a delineation between procedural knowledge and conceptual understanding, procedural knowledge, again, I'm a mathematics education educator, so I would think one of the examples I often use in my classroom is procedural knowledge for the division of fractions. The procedural knowledge that we were all taught in school was when you have division of fractions, you invert and multiply. So that's procedure. Whenever you see a fraction that is being divided by another fraction, you invert, multiply, and you get a solution. The process never changes, but the conceptual understanding, the conceptual piece of that is why. Why do we invert and multiply? Why? There has to be an underlying reason. So the procedure we understand never changes, but the conceptual piece is the understanding why it is happening. The knowledge targets are foundational for each of the other types of targets. Just as I said, you can't go into reasoning until you have knowledge, and each one builds on the one prior. So verbs such as know, list, names, identify, recall, think about if you have had the opportunity to look at Bloom's taxonomy, these are those lower level thinking verbs that he uses. So, just the ability to recall, to recite information, but you're not necessarily having the full understanding. That you are very quick to recall, but maybe not synthesize. Knowledge targets often begin with verbs such as understand. Students can explain concepts, again, those lower level thinking skills that we have, if you, again, have had the opportunity to work with Bloom's taxonomy, often correlate to his chart. So when we think about the difference between knowing and reference, with knowledge, so there's certain things that we have to know and we have to hold in our memories. It is something that becomes a part of our knowledge. But the second piece is also teaching children how to find and use resources when they don't have that knowledge or that recall that they may need to have. So we just need to think about, knowledge, but it may be knowledge that is stored, but it's also knowledge in how to gain information. So classifying targets as knowledge, although it seems very simplistic, it can be very complicated because we can't always focus on just the verb. It helps sometimes, again, when you have things like recall, define, those lower level thinking verbs, but you also have to think about what the intent of the assessment is. So here are 3 examples showing 3 different types of target. And I know we have not talked about skill or reasoning yet, but I think you can still see the difference between the 3. So for knowledge, knows how healthy practices enhance the ability to dance. So they may be listing, they may be just identifying certain practices that are good, that enhance your ability to dance. So a skill then would be an individual actually showing you various dances from different cultures. And then the third knows how to narrow or broaden inquiry when appropriate. So what is it? So now you have some piece of knowledge, and how you look at that knowledge and how you use that knowledge, and how you make sense of that knowledge. So reasoning targets. So that thought process that helps students apply knowledge in authentic context, knowing when and why you're using something. Again, the list of verbs that often go with reasoning. So hypothesize, compare, summarize, evaluate, higher level thinking skills. And there are 6 patterns of reasoning, as you can see on page 47 on your text. So you have inference, where you have inductive and deductive reasoning, analysis, comparison, classification, evaluation, and synthesis. So reasoning targets can become knowledge, and this is, you need to make sure that, again, what is the intent of a question. So if a teacher only asks a student to recall certain reasons, for example, please state the reasons why the Civil War occurred. Okay, that is a child recalling information that has been presented in the class that is not their reasoning. They have just listed what has been given to them through discussion, through maybe a lecture that somebody has provided to them. So it's not their reasoning. So the intent of a target is often best determined by how it is measured. So if it is knowledge, in the example I gave you, what are some of the reasons why the Civil War happened? That's procedural knowledge. That's saying this, 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 this. But if I said the Civil War occurred for these reasons, why do you think there was such a discourse between the southern and the northern states? Whatever it was, but it's more than about, okay, here are all these reasons, but what was going on and how are you synthesizing that information? A skill target is a little different than a reasoning, because this, you're actually demonstrating your knowledge. So it may be, again, an example on a previous slide, it might be how to do a certain dance, how to show a certain concept. Maybe if you're learning to throw pottery and you have chosen to make a bowl, but it's a skill that is being demonstrated and that is being assessed. Oftentimes in education we use the word skill, and it really is a different context than what I am talking about here. Oftentimes in education we'll talk about their reading skill level or their mathematics skill level, but that is something different. That is their level of comprehension, their level of knowledge, their ability to reason. It's not a skill in the sense of this learning target. It is, again, when we think of skill, it's a demonstration of some sort. Product. So this takes the skill and moves it up one more notch, where you now need to create a new product that hasn't been presented or has not been seen by the student, but yet they use their knowledge, their reasoning, and their skill to develop this product, whatever that product may be. So a couple of examples that may be used for our product in mathematics. So you take a set of data and you analyze it in a way, and then you display it so that it makes sense to those around you. So you use tables, graphs, scatter plots, whatever it is, so that it is understood by many people, but you have created it and you have synthesized it in a way that brings in your conceptual understanding of that data. If you're in nutrition or sports medicine, so you create a quality personal wellness plan that makes sure to incorporate all those things you have learned that have been important to make sure that you're healthy and taken care of. So disposition targets is the last, and as I stated earlier, it's one that we will not be using as part of our criterion, but a disposition target is, again, an effective measure. So we are looking for those things that change a way a person sees things, how they believe in things. At Appalachian State in the College of Education, you do have a disposition survey that you take, and your professors comment on disposition. So again, it's not being graded. It should never be graded, but it is showing your growth over time and your change in attitude. So 3 characteristics of disposition: specific objects, positive or negative direction, and varied levels of intensity from strong to weak. So why are good curriculum guides so important? And I brought this slide back. This is from the very first slideshow that I uploaded. So, and I just want to reiterate that curriculum and content, the first circle there on the top, that has been established. That is not what this class is about. This class, we are going to be using the curriculum, but it's not teaching you about the curriculum. You will get more information about the curriculum and content in your methodology classes that you take for your area of expertise. The learning experiences, again, this is not what this class is about. This class really focuses on the assessment piece. The learning experiences, again, will come during your methodology portion of your education, so where you'll be writing lesson plans and looking at student work. And the assessment then, like I said, is what we are focused on in this classroom or in this class. So this is now your first part of the curriculum-based assessment project, deconstructing complex content standards. So I'm going to click out of here for just a moment. I've got to pull up a couple different pages. The first is this document that you will need to pull from As You Learn. It is underneath the assignment for today's session. So you have, it says directions. After reading chapter 3, think about writing clear learning targets from your content standard objectives. Type or paste your content standard and our objectives in the first box. Then decide whether you think the standard is knowledge, reasoning, skill, or product. Next, write as many learning targets in student-friendly language as you can. Remember the age of your potential students. You may add rows to the table at the bottom of the page as needed. After writing the targets, try to classify them as knowledge, reasoning, skill, or product. And there are 10 different lines that I've given you here, but again, there are additional lines if you need those. I am going to go into math, and I'm pulling math just because I have it easily available here on my desktop. And we are going to pull a content standard, and we're going to walk through this assignment. So as soon as this opens, we will make sure and move ahead. There it goes. Okay, and remember the Common Core is written for mathematics and language arts. The rest will be essential standards. Okay. I'm sorry. Let me get. Okay, I'm going to pick. So I'm in grade 1 mathematics, and I'm going to select I'm going to pick one under here, under number and operation and base 10. So here is the standard I'm trying to meet, and here are the 3. So I'm going to copy and paste those here. Let me make those a little bit bigger. Okay, so I have my 3 standards here that I want to talk about. So when I look at these, I think about, okay, is it knowledge, reasoning, skill, or product? So understand that the 2 digits of a 2 digit number represent amounts of ones, or I'm sorry, of tens and ones. Understand the following as special cases. 10 can be thought of as a bundle of tens called a 10. The numbers from 11 to 19 are composed of a 10 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 ones. Numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, so on refer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a reasoning skill. In my mind, I see it as a reasoning skill. So then to meet those expectations, I need to put it in a way that children can understand. So I'm going to make I can statements from a child's perspective again. I can identify the 10 and the 1 in a two-digit number. So I'm going to call that knowledge, because they're just identifying. But if I say I can explain the difference between a 10 and a 1. I see that as a reasoning. I can use a 10 and a 1 to create a two-digit number. And again, I see that as a reasoning skill and possibly a reasoning target and possibly a skill target. So, and we could argue it one way or another. But so this is the first part of the assignment that you need to complete. You need to decide what grade level, you need to decide what standards you want to look at, and then you need to write I can statements or put them in friendly terms for students, and then decide what type of target that they are. Okay, and again, you can find that on As You Learn underneath today's session. All right. So when the written curriculum is not the taught curriculum, and again, I alluded to this earlier in the PowerPoint presentation, that textbooks should never become the curriculum. And unfortunately, in the classroom, oftentimes it does, because it is what is simple, most simple for the teacher. I think I shared with you that my dissertation was on teacher sense of responsibility in the classroom. And when I was still in public education, what I was noticing is that teachers were taking the text and just turning it into direct instruction, and that, number one, will never meet the standards that have been established for education, and number two, there are things that are in the textbook that are superfluous, that don't need to be a part of the child's learning, because they're either not in the grade band, or they could be taught in many other ways. So when we think about curriculum, we need to think of it more holistically, where it's not just what is done in the text, but what is done in the classroom to support that learning. So clear benefits of learning targets for the teachers. You know what to teach. You know what to assess. You know what types of instructional activities to plan. There's less focus on the coverage, more on the learning, which the coverage I just wanted to talk about briefly, because I think when we start looking at standards-based education, teachers, when it first came out many years ago, teachers tried to make it into a grocery list of topics. They said, okay, here's one topic. Well, I covered it today, so I'm done with it for the remainder of the year. And here's the next. So they kind of moved down the list. But when I want you to think about curriculum as it should be happening throughout the year, and you should be looking at multiple goals, multiple targets for each lesson, not one target for one lesson. So, and back to the first PowerPoint, remember we talked about collecting data? Well, then we have to make sure we're interpreting it, and teachers will understand how to interpret better, track, and then work collaboratively with other teachers. So the benefits to students, again, with the I can statements that you'll be working on for the activity, they now understand what they're responsible for. You know, when the Common Core and when the state standards originally came out, teachers would list the standards on their whiteboards or their bulletin boards or in their room somewhere. And, you know, those are not student friendly. The way the standards are written are not student friendly. So students didn't know what was expected of them. So we need to make sure that when we are writing targets, they are friendly, that students can understand them without confusion. You know, the targets then understand and acting on feedback and track and reflect on their own progress. Benefits to the parents. So now if you have a target, you've shared with the parents, they now feel that they're involved in their students' lives, their student school life, and they're more willing to help at home. They now understand how you're reporting grades, and then when they come in to talk to you twice a year or more often, you know, you have a direction to talk about at the conferences. So when we think about learning targets, everything we're going to do in this class, so we, like I said earlier, we are starting with the CBA, the performance assessment, and the content test is what we are beginning to work on now. And then the final assignment that is due at the end of this session is the analysis of student learning. So learning targets are relevant for everything that we are going to do for the remainder of the session. So back to the beginning with, this is the original slide. So learning targets for chapter 3. So when I think about the learning targets that I had established for chapter 3, explain the connections between clear target and assessment quality. When I think about that, I see that as a reasoning target because I have to explain the connection. I'm not just listing, but I have to be able to explain. Classify learning targets by type. That's going to be a knowledge because I'm just telling you this. Determine whether your learning targets are clear. Reasoning. Clarify and deconstruct learning targets as needed. Skill. You're going to show me something. You're going to produce something. Create student-friendly versions of learning targets as needed. Product. So we have talked about all 4 types except disposition again for the types of learning targets. So this is exactly what you will be doing for the activity today or for this session. So for today's session, you have an activity on classifying learning targets. You have to begin identifying your learning targets with the assignment and then take the short chapter 3 quiz. So if you have any questions, please make sure you contact me. If not, I will see you soon. Have a great day. Bye.